Welcome to all of our ISM members and guests joining us for today's program hosted by ISM New Jersey. Our speaker for today is Graham Crawshaw, who will be speaking on Unlock the Value of Integrated Facilities Management. Now, we will be running a few polls today, so please be sure to participate so we can get a good pulse from our audience today. We really would appreciate that. Also, please be sure to place any comments or questions in the chat function, and Graham will get to them either during the presentation or after the presentation. And now on to our speaker. I am so pleased to bring back Graham Crawshaw, who is the Procurement Content Director for CASME. And as he said, he's in London right now. What do you say, Central London?
Very much so. Yeah, Canary
So,
Wharf, central of the city.
Graham has the overall responsibility for the quality of CASME's global roundtable and virtual events programs. Prior to joining CASME, Graham spent 20 years working in procurement for the music industry with an operational and marketing environment and quite a few artists, like the Beatles, what was it, Pink Floyd,
It was, yeah, Queen, yeah, you name it,
Queen,
all the big ones.
all the big ones.
Yeah.
And Graham is also a fellow of SIPS and a frequent speaker for ProcureCon. And he just came back from two different ProcureCons, one in the States and one in, I think you said Vienna. So I'm going to
Vienna, that's right, yeah.
I'll turn the program right over to you, Graham. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Yes, I had a fantastic time in Orlando. Well, I'll say, hang on, it's October now, so at the start of last month, and the same in Vienna. There's just so much going on in procurement. But today we're here to talk about facilities management. This is one of my favorite categories. There's always so much something going on in the world of FM. So let me just make sure that that's all working. So I'm going to very briefly just set the scene, just to remind anyone that's not familiar how CASME supports procurement, but spend the most of the time talking about FM. Uh, at CASME, we put on different events throughout the world, in fact, over 200 in the year, encouraging and getting category managers to come together and share their challenges around the category. And of course, facilities management is one of those very core topics that we spend so much time talking about. It's from those events that we're able to produce different reports, different insights, and it's that information together with some other benchmarking surveys that we've done that I'm able to bring together and share with you today. So everything I share has come from procurement. That gives it the credibility. The membership, we've got over 200 members, just some of those that allow us to use their logo as shown on the screen. But you'll see lots of different sectors coming together to share information. So that really is very useful to get that pulse, that feeling as to what's going on. But the most important slide, and my last one about CASME, is making the point that, yeah, we are global, uh, but most importantly, we do not work with any suppliers, sponsors, or consultants. And so anything that I share with you today has come from procurement. There's no influence from suppliers, no one trying to sell anyone anything. And as someone that's been a category manager, that's dealt with a lot of facilities over the course of my career, I just think that's so important to actually get that perspective. So I hope it's going to be of interest. What I want to talk about is topics that we've covered at some of our events, very briefly looking at strategic development, stakeholder alignment, executing strategy, performance, and then looking at ongoing contracts. If you've got any questions, please use the chat. I will probably come back to them at the end simply because I'm using my laptop and I'm nervous of my screen. I normally work in a much bigger screen, but I'm a bit limited to today. Integrated facilities management. It's one of those topics that we have been talking about for some years now. And it's interesting because it doesn't work for every organization. So let's be very clear. The integrated aspect is when you select one major supplier, they in turn deal with the subcontractors or other suppliers. So that integrated approach simplifies the process. But of course, there is a cost for doing that. Companies typically will home in and use one supplier, maybe globally, but in practice, my experience with CASME members is it almost makes sense to have one supplier covering a region and maybe a different supplier covering a different region, just so that you've got that element of competitive advantage, to be able to make sort of comparisons rather than being completely reliant on one supplier. Let's face it, this is a long term commitment. Facilities is highly emotive. You don't need me to tell you that. I mean, my goodness, when I ran facilities contracts at some of the music companies we've been talking about, any complaint, whether it was the food that was being served, the cleanliness of some of the office accommodation or at the factories, it's like everyone has a personal view and perspective to share. So it's very emotive, and procurement's got quite a key role to play and support this, what is often a very high value contract for a company that is delivering a service to you that isn't part of your core business. So I think the reason why companies go to IFM, what they've told us is shown on the screen here. It's not a core competence for many organizations. It's one of those annoying set of services that is important, if not absolutely critical, but you've got to recognize that that's not what you do. Your business is not facilities management. The advantage of IFM and that consolidation is that then potentially you're only dealing with at best 12 invoices a year rather than potentially thousands of invoices from individual suppliers. But that does come at a cost. There's an implication in terms of what's that margin? How does it actually work commercially? It can deliver cost savings. And those that manage IFM correctly say they do receive cost reduction. And I think the secret is you've actually got to have a lot of trust with your supplier. You want a supplier that's going to come up with innovation, new ideas, challenge the way you're doing things. And again, because it's so emotive, that can be quite difficult. And if you don't allow the supplier to make change, then you're probably not going to see much in the way of cost reduction. Governance, standardization, I think those are two very key aspects. If you want the same approach in all of your facilities across a country, state, or even region or globally, then the IFM suppliers have got that ability to do it so that if you want it, that your security badges work throughout the world. It just makes it so much easier to get that consistency if that is important to your organization. Now, I've got some information here. If you're not familiar, then at CASME we do use market intelligence from the Smart Cube, which is a WNS company. And what this shows, and I've just extracted just one piece of information, and we're sharing these slides, and I know it's being recorded, so I'm not going to go through all the detail. That would be far too boring. But what you could see is the maturity is very evident in terms of facilities management. The suppliers are powerful. So the balance of power, the positioning is often very much in the supplier's strength and in their favor. And this is a North American snapshot of the information, but actually it would be the same in Europe, although there isn't that same maturity in the APAC region or Australia. So it depends where you are in the world as to whether IFM is really going to be totally effective or whether it's going to be a little more sort of piecemeal and bundling of different services. So very much, I'm not going to cover the specifics around this, but if you are interested in that Porter's analysis, which I always think is really useful and it is a key tool for anyone in procurement, then it's a great one to really understand what you're letting yourself in for. Because, as I said, this is a long-term relationship. Has to be right for your organization to even spend the time developing. And we know from experience talking with many of our members, if you go to the market and you go to the major IFN providers, but they don't want or don't find your business attractive, you will be in the situation that they just decline to bid. Now, what that means about you being attractive is the suppliers are looking to see how they can add value, add innovation, and that process then generates them some income. They don't want to just have contracts for buying revenue, they want to actually get some value. So if they think that you're not willing to change, if you are not organized, if you don't have the right information, if you don't have the support from senior level C suite to an IFM contract, in all likelihood, and we've got examples of this, companies, the suppliers will just decline to bid. That could be very frustrating and could severely impact your competitiveness of going to the market. I would like to do our first poll, and thank you, Kathy, for triggering this one. So, in terms of developing the IFM program, I'm keen to find out from you what are the three most important factors to determine when developing a program. And really like you to pick three. You could always pick all of them, but that would be a bit, there wouldn't be too much value. Once we've done the poll, I'm then going to share the same results that we've had from when we've run the poll. So, what we're looking at is those factors to determine whether IFM really makes sense to develop. You've got the cost and benefits. You've got the level of support that I've indicated. Have you got the stakeholders, the senior management on board? Have you got a clear understanding of the scope of services that you'd want to put out? Is that geographic coverage? Do you know where the sites are, where IFM is required? Do you know whether the IFM companies have got the capability to fulfill what you need in the regions, in the countries or states that you want? What do you think of the level of expertise and competency? What's the impact of an IFM program on the employees that are currently performing the service? Will they be able to transfer over? Some parts of the world that's easily dealt with by legislation. But what's the motivation, the whole morale of all of those companies? What's the impact in terms of ESG programs? Is that important to your criteria? So I would like you just to sort of pick three because I think that's going to give us a bit of a feeling of what of sort of how this group. We've got quite a small group today. I see 19 of us on the call. 9 have responded already. So hopefully you could just all just give us that data, just to give us those insights where you think the most important factors are to actually determine that development of an IFM strategy. So just give you a few more seconds there. And of course, there's no right or wrong, but I find it always interesting to understand what is the motivation, what is the driver for such change, and then of course does it make sense? It doesn't work for every organization, but that's quite good. I think if we all had the same strategy and took the same approach, then procurement would be a bit boring. But we know every company's got different ideas, different strategies, and that is what makes procurement so exciting to work in. So it's not just repeat and do all the same. In the interest of time, I'm going to stop. Let's end the poll there. Let's just sort of share those results, and hopefully you can see that. Because you've been able to 1 to 3, the percentages don't really work that well. It's the length of the bars that I'm looking at and the relative length compared to some of the points that we've made. So cost and benefit, no surprise, is one of the longest. Scope of service. You need to be clear that those suppliers are going to be able to take care of everything that you need. I am not surprised. ESG this year not featuring at all on the list. Who knows? It could have been different last year, maybe different next year. But the main focus does seem to be on capability and cost. So thank you. Let's stop sharing that. I'm going to move to show you the results when we have done the polls at CASME on the same survey. And no surprise that cost and benefit is number one. And I think that is almost typical of the pressures that we're under at the moment. All procurement teams globally are under immense pressure. So it's a question of doing what really makes sense, what can add value to the organization. Look at some of the others. The capabilities also is number two, very closely with the scope of services. So it just shows collectively we're saying this is what is important to procurement when developing a plan or an IFM strategy. Or you may review it and actually determine that it doesn't make sense. Maybe it makes sense just to look at the alternative, which is direct contracting or maybe limited bundling of soft services and hard services. So let's move on there. I've spoken already about stakeholder alignment. And I would say if your business is not willing or interested in making change, if the stakeholders really on not on board, you're wasting your time. I think it really is that clear cut. And in order to get that stakeholder alignment, these are the points that our members have been saying are so important. Now, of course, if you're going towards an IFM solution, your internal structure for managing FM must reduce. That's often where the biggest short-term cost savings. So it's referred to as you need a thin client structure. You don't want people duplicating the effort that the supplier is doing. But I do appreciate that means that you've got to have the trust and the relationship with the supplier, and then the stakeholder needs to be also on board with that. So how can you do that? Well, I think it is ensuring that the stakeholder sees this as a priority, that they're on board with it. We've got the senior executives also on board. But I think the IFM provider also needs to be very much engaged. And I think the role of procurement is to work out how exactly you do get aligned, how exactly you have those regular meetings, probably a steering committee to manage those fundamental decisions that need to be taken, also to manage performance. So this isn't a challenge just for procurement. You can't do this alone. Unlike other fundamental contracts that people put in place, it's got to be an overall company strategy. Get that in place, then you can be really very effective with that. How to do it? What's the strategy that we've got? And really like the idea of ensuring that you stand the best chance to actually sort of execute this right when you're doing your RFP process. So you can see here, a lot of people actually start with an RFI, no surprise. And I think also, given the complexity, many organizations would actually have third party FM specialists supporting that, ensuring the statement of work, ensuring that the contract does meet the requirements. I think there are different approaches depending how mature, how structured you are. Certainly, one of those is almost just sort of give an open book, let the suppliers see exactly what you're doing and how it's working, the suppliers you're presently using, and let them piece together a proposal on that basis. Or the alternative, which is also viable, no right or wrong, but to perhaps start with like a zero-based budget and then sort of work out exactly what you are going to achieve. I think because of the nature of the suppliers, it's important to then engage with global, regional, and maybe local ones to make sure that there's alignment with the statement of work, what you're trying to achieve, and what the potential suppliers can provide. So that analysis and market research really is very important. Let's do another poll because again that helps us formulate exactly how we're all thinking today in terms of evaluating and selecting suppliers. So, Kathy, number two poll. What are the three most important criteria for evaluating and selecting suppliers? Once again, I'll be able to share the CASME information straight after this one. Is that second poll live, Kathy? It's my screen. I can't quite tell if it is or it isn't. The options that you've got, the reason for selecting or evaluating supplier, is it based on service capabilities, quality, industry specific expertise, their core competencies, geographic coverage, cultural compatibility? I think that is really important. You have to work with suppliers that are very much aligned with the culture of your organization. Is it about compliance with policy and regulation? The quality of account management. I have heard many times that basically contracts fail if the account management is just a clash of personalities and is not going to work for your organization. Then, of course, technological capability and innovation, pricing and cost modeling, then finally ESG capability. So for some reason, I can't see that poll, Kathy, is that all working at the moment? Um,
Actually, I'm not sure. It worked before.
okay, let's. I don't think that poll's gone live as yet.
Or
So could
yeah,
you?
let me see if I can launch it. The launch button isn't working for some reason. I don't know
Oh,
why.
let me
That's
just
the
give it.
reason, everybody.
Oh dear.
I'm not
No,
sure
it's
why though.
not.
I don't know why it's not working.
Okay. Well,
Sorry,
let's not.
everybody.
Let's not worry. I'm going to go straight to the results from CASME then. Let's share
Whoops.
that with you. It's Zoom at times. It's great, but it does sometimes have a little wobbly. Um, so these are the results from the CASME members. So again, a much larger number of individuals compared to on the call. So arguably, it's true reflection. But if you look, the first poll, we were pretty closely aligned, and look at the results here. It is about the. I mean, they're very similar with a margin of error. The proposed pricing and cost modeling, which we'll look at in detail in a bit, but then also save service capabilities and quality. And I think what that's telling us is you've got to get the service right. You've got to be confident that whichever way you're going to run these contracts, that it's going to deliver what you need, and therefore quality of service and the ability to deliver what you want. And let's face it, that can be including some very specialist type of services as well. Just depends on your organization. And if you look at some of the other percentages, yeah, it is all important. I'm slightly surprised about the quality of the personnel and account management, but I think all being relative to each other, it's just interesting to see. This is how you should be evaluating when selecting suppliers. Okay, looking at strategy and execution. I'm not surprised that change management features immediately as soon as we start to look at this. This is a massive change management. Anyone that's switching suppliers under IFM, even if the second tier or those actually providing the service are going to be the same and are working for your main IFM supplier, it's still a change management. There's a lot going on, a lot of change. So it really is important to understand the whole culture and the structure of the whole sort of process because you need it. You need that research in place. You need to have everything sort of adopted. And once again, to get that executed, use of external consultants and having structured project teams, that seems to be the way that it's most effective to get in place. We love talking about KPIs. Now, I said earlier about the importance of a thin client structure. And so you need to rely on the KPIs. Now, my experience is some of these suppliers have got so many KPIs, it almost becomes either overfacing or meaningless if they're trying to measure absolutely everything. You would expect them to take care of some of the details, but it's then what is elevated and escalated to you. What do you want to do? If a KPI is always shown as green, there's almost no point in it being reporting to you. When we asked our members what is important, this is what we said. Look, you really do need these service levels. You need the areas around sort of compliance, service delivery, savings, response time, and customer sort of satisfaction. I think at the highest level that works. I think it's also very clear that you need the resource to be able to effectively manage and monitor those KPIs. So you got to do something with it rather than just collect data for the sake. And if you are getting a consistent green one and everything is fine, then almost find another one that you need to work on and develop. But those are the headings. So if you in your planning cover all of that, then that will give you a good head start. I probably should have put this slide earlier in the presentation, but I didn't. I wanted to show you, and this is actually data from the Smart Cube. At CASME, we are completely supplier agnostic, and I think that's important to get across. So we've got no connections, allegiances, or anything to do with any of the suppliers. But in terms of IFM, there aren't that many. There are not that many key players globally that can actually provide that service whereby they are taking on board all your requirements and they're then subcontracting to others. Of course, we're very familiar with the likes of CBRE, Sodexo, JLL, but there's a whole list of others and just some. So when I've just been talking in general terms about key players, these are the sort of suppliers that we are talking about. And in practice, I'm often asked the question, well, is which is the best? Which ones are better than others? The very fact that they are all large global players, they must be doing something right. So I think it's more about that alignment and fit and culture to your business and your requirements. And generally, my experience is that if the contract fails, it's either down to mismanagement, and I would have to say on both sides, lack of change management, or just there's something more sort of fundamental, but it's almost 50-50 between the supplier and procurement if the relationship just doesn't work out. And so just changing suppliers, it it doesn't always help. It depends on the fundamental issues, especially given that typically the people actually delivering the service day by day are likely to transfer or chupi over to a new management company. So the management, that whole approach of having the relationship, having the confidence in the supplier is absolutely critical. Excuse me, talking too much today. We've got our third poll, and I'm hoping it'll work. Let's give it a go, Kathy, because I think this is an interesting one for all procurement professionals and understanding how are you actually entering into a contract with
Uh,
your FM supplier. Any
oh,
luck this time?
yeah, hold on. I think I got it. Hold on.
You think you got it? Fingers crossed,
Yeah.
because this is an important one. This is one that I'm really keen to
Okay.
get your views on.
Okay. Now we got it.
You got it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Here we
there we
go.
go. Well done. Fantastic.
Sorry about that, everybody.
The gremlins have sorted themselves out. So please, what type of cost modeling are you using? And I'll give you the options because these are all options that do get talked about quite a lot, but I do agree that there's different approach. Just depends again on the organization and what works for each company. I think it's important to get the transparency right. So whichever model you're using, you want that transparency of cost to really be very clear. So the options you've got, just in case that is helpful for people, it's either a fixed price and fees, a cost plus management fee, guaranteed maximum price, incentive and penalty models linked to performance, or a which one have I missed out? Oh, the gain share models linked to cost savings and implemented innovation. So those are the ones that, again, all of these have come from many hundreds of category managers that look after facilities management contracts. So it's not a coincidence that we've picked those as options for you to select. Um, and you can pick more than one. So if you do have multiple models, please put that. Any more responses? I think if not, let's end the poll there. Thank you, Kathy, and share the results. So it's an interesting one because we often talk about gain share. We often talk about linked models linked to performance. But the reality is that because it's a large contract, large value contract, do we have the confidence? I do know that certainly if you are going to a first time, so a first generation IFM contract, it's probably less likely that you would be interested in gain share models or incentives for linked to performance. However, after maturity, and it may be 5 or 7 years to get that maturity, companies going on to second generation may be more likely to consider a different pricing model. So I think maturity of procurement, maturity of the supply, and the contract they're providing is absolutely critical in this one. So no surprise that fixed price and fees, because that's what we want. We want to budget. We want to know what is this actually going to cost us. I think what I've seen over the last 5 6 years is a move away from a cost plus a management fee because that tends to drive the wrong behavior. If it's only about cost, there's not enough incentive, and if the costs go up and the fee gets bigger, then you're likely to lose, and the supplier is more likely to gain. I think the results for the gain share or the GMP or the incentives really reflect the maturity. That's why it'll be fascinating to repeat this entire conversation in 5 years' time because I've seen it slowly maturing, but it does take time. And if you are sat here listening thinking, well, actually, everyone else is more mature in terms of their contracts, the chances are that's not the case at all. It's still a learning curve that procurement is going through. Let's stop the sharing there and let me then show you the same results from CASME. Fascinating. You see here, this incentive is much more prevalent. Is that because the people that responded are more mature? Maybe we've got more. Is in fairness, we've had results coming also from Europe into this, where I think IFM is very well established. Um, so it's just interesting that whole maturity conversation. I haven't got an answer for that, but it's useful for you to reflect on what we're sharing here in terms of the data. Equally, that cost plus a management fee is above the fixed price. So it's a mix. I think what I'd like you to take away from this is there are different cost models depending on what works for your situation, and maybe if you've used cost plus for the last 5 years, maybe try something different. See how the market or the suppliers react if you look to do a different model. If you could trust the supplier more, do they build in less risk and therefore willing to share more with you? That's the experience I do know from certainly from pharmaceutical companies that tend to be more mature in this particular aspect. They've got greater experience, greater longevity of IFM contracts, and therefore are more likely to have got that maturity and therefore be more comfortable with either performance based or gain share models. So, looking at supplier performance, of course, you've got to measure the supplier. We've already talked about the KPIs. I think it's important that it's a very clear service level agreement that you have in place, very clearly defined, regularly reviewed sort of KPIs. In practice, because of the spend levels, it is relevant to have QBRs. Now, good practice certainly is to try and split those QBRs from more operational activities and reviews, and those perhaps dedicated to look at change or to look at innovation or new ideas. And by separating those conversations, you're more likely to be successful rather than getting caught up on the day-to-day issues. And my goodness, my own experience, I still remember when when the president comes down and tells you that the curry wasn't very good today. It's like, for goodness sake, this is a multi-million-dollar contract. Do I really care about the last meal that you've eaten? Well, of course, the answer is, of course I did. It just shows you some of the challenges that we face as procurement professionals. We always get so involved in these areas. So, in terms of performance management, it is critical that you incorporate that, document and plan so that it's known in advance how you are going to manage the contract. And so, in terms of SRM, we talk a lot about SRM. We know that you can't do SRM for all of your suppliers, but typically in an organization, it is such a high value contract that the IFM supplier is going to be on that list of organizations that you develop and spend a lot more attention doing SRM. And so when we asked our members, when we had conversation about this, it's like, well, okay, assuming that this is what's included in the SRM program, what are the activities that you're talking about? I particularly like the 360-degree feedback. You need that relationship such that the supplier can get back to you with the honest approach. Are you micromanaging? That's what I hear quite regularly from conversations on IFM. Procurement or the business that won't let go, won't allow the supplier the opportunity to be flexible, to add innovation. I think it's also appropriate to have very specific innovation workshops mentioned on the previous slide. It may be part of a quarterly business review. It may be part of another sort of conversation that you're having. I think also the annual executive meetings, such as the spend on IFM, it warrants that level of engagement and cooperation at that point. So definitely something that needs to be considered. We talked a lot about ongoing contracts. There is a time that could be very frustrating, that if things perhaps aren't going to plan, that you just want to believe that resolving the problems can be achieved by switching suppliers. Experience within IFM is that is rarely the case. I've already shared about sort of that responsibility that if things are going wrong, procurement and the business have also got a responsibility to take that on board. So we've had a lot of conversations about ongoing contracts. You want to avoid that knee-jerk reaction of termination, going to the market, starting again. The market may not like the way that you have managed the one supplier. And believe me, that word gets around. And that's a situation where suddenly you find that the suppliers aren't willing to participate or won't respond. If you've got underperformance, then why? What's going on? Where is it going wrong? What's the way to correct it? Rarely is it ideal situation just to say, we'll get rid of this supplier, we'll bring a new one in. So, in fact, IFM is one of those contract areas that potentially you agree to take a different approach. Companies have strict policies about going to the market every X number of years, but facilities is one of those areas that you may choose not to do that, that you get exemption to continue the contract. That maybe you may have had a 5 year contract, maybe it's been on a 3+1+1 or 5+1+1. It may not be advisable to then go to the market. We know often the situation is it's better to work with the supplier that you've got to address some of the problems, address some of the concerns. The act of going to the market is expensive for suppliers. Typically, it can be a six-figure dollar sum to actively provide you a tender response, which is why you get these companies declining. And of course, I forgot to say the other reason they may decline is if there's a lot of other companies going to the market. That's one good reason for using external consultants because they've got a feel for which companies are out in the marketplace. And you almost want to go at a time when it makes sense for you to do so rather than you competing with other companies that are also putting out large multi-million or hundreds of millions of dollars of IFM contracts. So understanding that and maybe getting agreement internally that you don't go to the market, but you jointly spend that money on some innovation or some changes, or you just review the contract. So avoiding the marketplace for IFM, I mean, and I think IFM is one of those few categories where going to tender, issuing an RFP may not make sense. Maybe it's just better to review, restructure, and reposition the contract you've got rather than thinking we've done 5 years, we've done 7 years, we need to see what's going on there. But you need that transparency, you need the cost information to be able to then ensure that you know that you're still getting competitive and good value. And that's one reason why, if you are entering in a global contract, it may make sense to have, say, JLL in one location, one region, and Sodexo or one of the other major suppliers supporting another region, just so that you could do that high level benchmark. If you're doing it on your own, if you're using a third party, then again, that can help you smooth out some of the issues and decide, well, actually, from a business case perspective, it makes sense just to renegotiate the contract. So lessons learnt, which wanted to share with you today. Get the KPIs in place. Have a whole process for effective evaluating the performance. Of course, you've got to be compliant. Regulatory compliance is important, and given that there can be rules in different parts of the world, it can make it quite complicated. The way that you look and choose your model, pricing model, may be one that you want to vary and at least consider all the different options. And then I think it really is the value is such that it does require that constant review. Wow, that was a lot. Talked a lot. In fact, I need a quick drink. I'd love to. I'm going to stop sharing. I'd love to know if you have got any questions. That's my summary of what's going on in IFM in October 21st day of October 2025. And if you disagree with the statements, then as always, I say at this point, I've not made this up. It certainly hasn't come from some AI model. That information, that guidance has come from hundreds of category managers that are managing IFM contracts around the world. So, Kathy, let's bring you back into to the conversation. So I don't know if anyone has any comments, questions, or sort of observations.
We do have one that
Wow.
just came in.
Mm.
We have a 15-year relationship with IFM provider, but no SOWs or SLAs available. What's the best way to gather those from the vendor?
I think you need a meeting. I think you need a discussion about it. I don't think. Thank you for the question, Matthew. And 15 years. I'm not surprised. I do know companies that really do that lengthy period of time. But and I wouldn't blame the provider. I think that would be wrong because you've allowed this contract to go. Not you personally, I hasten to add. I'm sure, but your organisation has allowed that relationship to go without any statement of work or service level agreements. Procurement's got a lot more sophisticated, a lot more mature. The technology has changed so much over the last 15 years that I think, well, actually, may be a good time to say it's got to change. And so I would be very sort of cards on the table, if that's an expression that works, it does in the UK. Have a very sort of very open, transparent conversation and say, look, we may have had success in terms of managing a relationship over the last sort of 15 years, but you always need to plan for the next 5, 10. And I think it is now appropriate that time is spent evaluating the way things are done and incorporating that into an SLA. So rather than seeing it as a criticism of the supplier or criticism of your own organization, I think it's one of those that sort of you need to workshop to make that happen. And I think both parties need to invest in a bit of time and resource. But I think if you did continue, you would probably find that it gets harder and harder. You certainly would be struggling to go to the market credibly without a statement of work or SLA. So it sounds like now would be or as soon as you can, would be the time. But I say I wouldn't be critical of the supplier because I would say it's 50-50. It would be just one of those things that where you would say, right, okay, over the next 12 months, and it could take that long, we need to get this in place. Who can help you? How do you form that project team to achieve that? That would be my thought. Again, meeting schedule, fantastic, excellent. My goodness, but that's great, and there's nothing wrong with a 15-year relationship. I think the more mature, the more the supplier understands your business, the better they can deliver. I would suggest there's a lot of value that you could drive out if you did invest in getting SLAs and statement of work. So actually, that's a tremendous opportunity you've got there, Matthew. I think that could really help. And I imagine the IFM provider is probably quite nervous as to because they must realise that you're operating without this governance in place. And if you are open and transparent and see that as a collaborative piece of work, I'm sure they're going to appreciate that, and I think there's opportunity there for you to really drive some value. So yeah, be fascinated to see how you get on there.
No more questions, but I did want to ask, which area of the IFMs do you think are the most challenging?
I always think catering. It is so emotive. I sort of half jokes about the curry example. The problem with catering is that it is, and I guess everyone on the call will relate to this. And I use this example as a procurement professional in your mind when you talk about we want to have a meal for our employees and we want some nice chicken and maybe some new potatoes and veg and they're putting that forward as a proposal and are pricing it and you will understand what that is in your mind. You've got this image of a nice free range chicken that's been having a happy life on a farmyard, and you've got this nice sort of 6 ounce, 8 ounce chicken breast on your plate with some nice gravy sauce and vegetables. In the supplier's mind, if you are not specific on what you're looking for, they're thinking we can produce a mechanically reclaimed chicken burger, still with the potatoes and veg, but a fraction of the cost. So in my mind, it's all about the specification. And if you don't have the detail of the specification, there's going to be room for error. There's going to be room for, oh, well, I thought we were talking about this. You thought we were talking about that. So I always think of the nice organic chicken versus the mechanically reclaimed chicken as a great example of you've got to get it right. And I think catering people food and drink, and you only need to change supplier, and sort of people will associate a price rise in the staff restaurant or canteen with sort of a massive HR issue. So it's incredibly emotive. So I love facilities contracts and catering contracts, but they are so emotive. And if anyone has a story to share or agrees, then please put it in the chat. But it's definitely one you've got to get right, and you've got to work out the supplier has got to be told. Well, are you looking to subsidise? More and more companies don't want to subsidise; they just want to get that gross profit margin at a set percentage, often about 35%. Similarly, in terms of IFM markups, that again is the range of probably 4 to 8%. So there are definitely some industry norms, and you just got to make sure they are aligned to the specification that you've got.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you. I don't see any more questions, but before we go, I want you to tell everybody about the next time you're coming to see us.
I'd love coming to join the New Jersey chapter. 4th of December. I'll be here talking about AI in procurement. And I was just saying to Kathy, having attended a number of procurement conferences in North America, in Europe, in fact, also in Australia and in Singapore recently, understanding the hype beyond beyond the hype with AI. And I want to specifically focus on some of the prompt development that you could use that's really going to help procurement. So if you're not using AI or you are using it, then I'm definitely going to be sharing some interesting insights there because I do know a lot of companies aren't using it. They're still learning, but there's an opportunity there. And so we've been doing some benchmarking, having conversations. So looking forward to spending an hour just sort of sharing it. We'll have some polls and hopefully some chat questions as well. So 4th of December at 2 o'clock Eastern time. So looking forward to that. That'll be the last one for this year. Then, Kathy, I guess we need to develop the program for next year. I always like to do about 4 of these the year, and shout out to the likes of Sherry that always joins these and gives feedback. I just love having the conversation with procurement. So yeah, look forward to that. So thank you, Kathy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you everybody for joining us and bearing with me because poll number 2 didn't work too
Ah,
well
never
this
mind,
time.
never mind.
But there's always glitches every now and then. But I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Graham. We will have this recording probably posted a little later today, and we'll send it out to everybody. And come back and join us again December 4th when Graham comes back.
Fantastic. Thank
Okay,
you all.
thank
Take care
you.
then.
Okay,
Bye.
bye-bye, everybody.